Still no sign of the rain stopping, or even abating, Paula thought with a frown as her rubber boots stepped into one of the countless small streams running across her property. What had started as a light drizzle not even 4 days ago had now turned into a never-ending shower that seemed intent on flooding the whole area. And the lot where her house stood, being a bit lower than the rest of the properties around, would be the first to go. She growled again as she continued walking around her backyard that was already filling up with muddy rainwater, rotting leaves, and trash people had dumped on the road running by. One last time, she looked back at her house and shook her head. Soon, the water would start flooding her basement, which would mean the repairs would get prohibitively expensive, or it would turn the whole property uninhabitable. She could afford neither of those options and already knew the insurance company would try to fuck her over once she filed a claim. It would be far better to mitigate the damage or even stop it before it could happen. And to do that, she would need to unclog that damn drain in the back of her garden. The first owner had wisely built it almost 150 years ago, probably because he had seen other properties getting flooded, coupled with the steep slopes around the area. She had no idea where the drain went or even how much water it could take on, but every tiny bit might help. The only problem was that the last few owners of this piece of land had apparently forgotten about that part of the property. So she had to hope it hadn't clogged up completely these past few decades. Well, she would find out soon enough, Paula thought, and pulled on her raincoat and stepped through the already growing puddle. Soon, this whole area would be underwater. Her lawn would be ruined just before winter could set in, and, if they were especially unlucky, a sudden cold snap would mean the forming ice might break apart the foundations of the homes around. She shivered at the thought, sped up, and crossed the lawn. In the back corner, she could already see it. A slab of concrete with a circle in its center, surrounded by dirty water that had risen above it. The woman who had shown her this place a few years ago had also shown her how to operate it. There was a metal ring in its center, one that could be pulled up to shift parts of the metal circle, which would then open up and let in the water. Paula herself had neither seen nor heard about a drain like that, but the nice lady had told her not to worry about it too much. That it might actually come in handy. How right she had been. Judging by the size of the concrete slab, she could probably drain her whole yard into it a few times over, and the water would soon seep into the ground down there, leaving her own home undamaged. What a great idea the first owner had. The tips of Paula's rubber boots reached the cement slab, and a sudden, indistinct feeling came over her. That doesn't look like a drain. This voice inside her head piped up again. No one would build something like this. It was closed off right now. Apparently, tightly enough to not let in any water at all, judging by the liquid pooling on top of it. What if it wasn't meant as a drain, but had a different purpose? She shook her head to get rid of the thoughts, walked into the slab, and looked for the metal ring. It was lying in a groove especially made for it. Someone must have spent quite some time to make it look as inconspicuous as possible, she thought. Why would someone do something like that for a simple drain? Again, she growled at herself in her mind and bent down, put her hand into the cold water and grabbed hold of the ring. No matter what its purpose had been, right now it would be used as a drain, she told herself, took a deep breath and pulled at the ring. The chain connected to it slid out at the slightest tug, and Paula felt vibrations running through the slab she was standing on. Somewhere inside, metal scraped over stone as the mechanism rumbled. It hadn't sounded this ominous before, she thought. When that lady had shown her, it hadn't made much noise at all. She looked down and could see the metal circle inside the slab slowly shifting, then moving, then suddenly sliding open. Paula felt the part she was standing on disappearing into the slab as she lost her balance. Time felt like it was slowing down. Raindrops were hitting her face as she screamed, her foot already stepping into nothingness, pulling her along. The ring on the chain fell from her grasp. Her leg disappeared into the drain. The sole of her other foot slipped on the concrete, just as her knee hit the inside of the circular hole. Pain shot up her leg, but Paula couldn't concentrate on that. She was falling. Reaching out, she tried to grab hold of anything at all. Her hand hit the slab on the side and gripped the edge as her body disappeared inside the opening. Paula's other hand grabbed hold of the edge on the opposite side. She looked up and could see water flowing in. It hit her straight in the face as she opened her mouth to cry out for help. Her fingers were slipping. She felt gravity pulling at her. Water was coming from above. There was a strange smell in the air, one she had never smelled this strongly before. The odor of rot and dust. Her fingers kept slipping. It felt like the darkness below was pulling at her legs. Paula turned her head to catch her breath, then screamed. But with the shout, her fingers slipped off the edge of the circular hole, and she felt her body falling. Wind rushed past her ears as a single droplet of rain seemed to hover in front of her face. She reached out to find the walls around her and break her fall, but her fingers only touched air. The space below that strange opening was far wider than she had imagined, and now she was tumbling into the darkness. The raindrop falling next to her disappeared, and Paula braced herself a split second before her back crashed against a wall, and all the air got pushed out of her lungs. Stars were dancing in front of her eyes. She wanted to scream again, but knew she wouldn't manage to bring out a single sound. The force of the impact turned her body, and Paula raised her arms to protect her neck and head. Not seeing what was going to happen made it so much worse. She thought she would die with the next impact. Her life would end just like that. Paula closed her eyes in the darkness and felt her shoulder hit something not even a second later. Soft, wet dirt. Dust and droplets burst up into her face as she finally hit the floor of wherever she had fallen. She felt her body shooting forward from the impact and now screamed, even though she knew it would be pointless. The slope she had crashed onto carried her down as she rolled over and over, hitting pebbles and more mud while she tumbled through the darkness. Paula could feel the throbbing pain in her shoulder every time that part of her body touched the ground, but she could do nothing to protect it. She needed to keep her head and neck safe. As long as she survived, she would have a chance to get back up. Her back touched the ground, and instead of rolling over again, she now slid down the slope. Dust was filling the darkness around her, but there was another noise as well. One of water falling and hitting the ground. But not next to her, no. Instead, the sound seemed to be coming from far below her. Her hands left the sides of her head, and she dug her fingers into the soft mud she had been sliding on. Paula felt the strain right in her fingernails as she clawed at the floor to stop her body. Her foot touched something hard and rugged. Then, nothing. With a groan, she spread her arms and finally held on, just as her second foot extended out over the edge. Paula felt her heart beating almost out of control. Water was flowing from above, rushing past her and dropping again by her feet. She rolled over to the side and felt the mind-numbing pain once more as her shoulder touched the soft ground that seemed to be made of sand and mud. The more water came down, the more dangerous it would get. She couldn't see a thing, yet felt the pull of the stream, trying already to drag her along, down the cliff by her feet. Paula groaned and cursed, but kept rolling to the side. She was completely drenched already, and mud was sticking to her. But she could only concentrate on one thing: get away from the edge. Her back hit a rough stone wall at her side, and she put out her hands to grab hold of it. This wasn't what should have happened. She shouldn't be here, down in the darkness, clinging to the rough stone and praying for help. No. Paula groaned and tried pulling herself up. Ever so slowly, her feet scraped back over the edge and onto the mud-covered stone she was lying on, while the water still rushed by her and dropped onto the rocks below. Paula gave herself a second to catch her breath. The pain in her shoulder was bad right now, but she knew that she needed to keep calm anyway. Panicking now would lead to her death. She pressed her face against a cold stone and continued breathing. Water was still rushing past her, but now Paula felt like it was getting worse. She knew how dangerous even small amounts of flowing streams could be. It didn't take much for a human to get dragged along. And down here, without something to hold onto or a way of escaping, she could easily lose her grip and plunge to her death. A whimper came out of her mouth. It was a sorrowful, desperate sound. What could she do? Climb up? There was no way she would be able to get out of the hole, her instincts told her. Especially not with her shoulder like this. She would have to be lucky to even make it to the spot she had landed on without losing her grip and sliding back down again. No. The sound of rushing water in the darkness made her heart speed up even more. So she had to wait down here, hoping and praying that one of her neighbors had seen her fall into the drain and would call one of the emergency lines. Paula almost despaired, before a sudden memory shot into her mind like lightning. 10 minutes ago, when she had gotten dressed, she had looked back from the door and seen her smartphone on the kitchen table. She had walked back and put it in the pocket of her raincoat. Something she normally would have never done. One hand let go of the stone as she pressed herself even tighter against the wall. It was in the pocket inside the coat. If it was still working, she could call for help herself. With shaking fingers, Paula opened the zipper a tiny bit and pushed her hand in. The material there was mostly dry, so her phone should be at least safe from the water. If it had also survived the fall, it would work. Her fingertips brushed over something made of plastic, and Paula wanted to scream from joy. She hadn't misremembered it, truly. It was here. This was her chance at salvation. Her shaking fingers grabbed hold of the device and pulled it out slowly. It was warm against her skin. Did that mean it would still work? Paula could feel her heart racing out of control. She held it in front of her face and pressed her cold thumb to the screen. Soft white light illuminated her, and she was able to let out a howl. It felt almost blinding in the darkness, and she had to blink away some tears until she could see clearly enough to unlock it. A tiny droplet of water hit the screen, and Paula pushed herself back further against the rough wall to keep the device away from the drops flying through the air. She could even see her own breath in the cold light of the smartphone as she tapped the main screen and then suddenly froze. "No," Paula hissed, shaking her head in disbelief. "No," she whispered again, tears building in her eyes. No signal. She looked around and then back at the screen. Still, no signal. No chance of calling anyone. No path to salvation. Paula felt the coldness disappearing. It was like she was watching herself from outside her body, half sitting, half lying pressed against a cold and rough stone wall, staring at the bright screen, yet unable to do anything with it. She would die down here, she thought. No one would come looking for her. Water would continue to rush past her, and soon it would pull her down and smash her against the rocks below. Paula heard a wailing noise coming from her throat, then echoing back from the walls and abyss just past her feet. It wasn't an echo, her mind warned. Even after she stopped, she could still hear this voice from down below. This mournful, sad wailing. Paula felt like she couldn't take it anymore. Was her mind cracking under the pressure already? But the voice didn't stop. To the contrary, it got louder. The wailing was echoing from the walls around her while she pressed her mouth and nose into the crook of her elbow to stop herself from making any sound. It was coming up, she realized. The screen of her phone started to flicker. Paula wanted to scream for help, but knew that she mustn't do that. Her instinct screeched at her to keep her mouth shut. The wailing got louder and louder. Something touched the edge just below her feet. She could feel it. This cold air came up, rushing past her, followed by the stench of rot and blood she had smelled when the drain had first opened. The wailing stopped. Something touched her ankle, and Paula screamed into the crook of her elbow. She couldn't do anything to protect herself. If she let go and struggled, she would slide down and fall. Paula raised a leg and kicked out into the darkness. She hit nothing but air. The light of her phone was still flickering, but now she turned the screen toward her lower body. For a single moment, Paula could see what had come up. A ghostly, translucent figure was crawling toward her. Sunken in skin, patchy hair, and an open mouth, eternally screaming, appeared, then disappeared with the next flicker of the phone. A cry that had been building in her throat got stuck as the phone almost fell from her grasp. Whatever this thing really was, it had already reached up to her knees and seemed intent on crawling on. What did it want? Why was it here? There were no answers to these questions, only a quicker flickering of the light. It was coming, her mind told her, yet she felt completely helpless to stop it. Something touched her hip, pressed down on her, and Paula whimpered. The smell got worse, more intense. It was filling her mouth and nose and almost made her retch. A second hand found her shoulder, yet as she instinctively put up her arm, she didn't feel anything there. The light of her phone turned off. A low, sorrowful moan appeared next to her ear. The screen of her phone turned on just for a single instant, but it was enough. Paula saw the ghostly apparition right in front of her. Their noses, or what was left of the figures, almost touched. She was staring her in the eyes, and Paula screamed just as the light died off again, plunging her into complete darkness. The sound of water rushing past stopped, as did the moan. She didn't even feel cold anymore, or the rough stone she had been clinging to. It was as if she were floating through space, completely abandoned and alone. Paula tried to speak, but nothing happened. She couldn't even feel her own racing heartbeat anymore. This thing, it had done something to her. But it didn't feel threatening. Not like it wanted to hurt her. Paula blinked, and then suddenly found herself back in the cave. Only now, it looked completely dried out. There was no water streaming in, but now she could see the light up above. The spot beneath the inlet, where she had landed, was brightly lit. Paula got to her feet and found that her shoulder didn't hurt either. It was strange, she thought, and as she stood up, it felt like she had broken through some kind of barrier. Different noises started to reach her. Sounds of birds and the wind. They were singing outside the cave in the sunlight. She needed to leave. Now. Paula took a step as suddenly a scream cut through the pleasant ambience. Shadows fell upon the spot of light beneath the inlet before, at the next moment, something big hit the floor. A man, dressed in shabby clothing and spitting up blood, was lying there. Paula didn't get time to think about it before the next scream filled the air. It was the shout of a woman. Shadows moved in front of the opening as she got pushed in as well. With a howl, she fell and landed on the man who hadn't regained consciousness. The woman didn't seem to care. She was up on her feet in an instant, jumping at the wall and trying to climb the rough stone with her bare hands. From above, laughter filled the air, followed by the crying of a child. Paula watched as the woman slipped off the rock, fell and landed on her back, but was up on her feet in less than a second. She screamed and jumped up and tried to climb again, but every time she fell back down. Paula could feel her desperation. She hadn't looked at the man who was lying there dead once. There was blood trickling from her fingernails and numerous bruises all over her body. And she could see the exhaustion in the woman's expression. But she didn't stop. The sun sank down and she was still jumping at the wall, clawing at the stone, but unable to get out again. Finally, after hours upon hours, Paula watched her give up and sink down next to the dead man's body. She curled up and slept there, with her head next to the corpse. The world around Paula got dark, but when she blinked, it was bright again, and the woman was trying to climb up once more. Days passed like that, and while the woman got more and more desperate, the corpse started to bloat. It was after about a week when something changed. Paula blinked and could see the woman not jumping up anymore, but lying there next to the body of the man. The stench was mind-numbing, but she didn't even seem to realize it. It was then that the man returned. Paula could hear him and saw the woman suddenly sit up. There was madness in her eyes as she noticed him as well, coming closer, together with a child who was crying. She also saw the woman's fingers digging into the soft mud, trying to find something to throw. But the man's shadow never fully appeared above the hole. Instead, she had him dump a bucket of refuse into it, laugh, and then drag the child away. The woman in front of her was shaking her head as well. Tears were running down her cheeks as she started digging through the dumped-in contents with her fingers. eating what had been given to her. She wanted to turn away. This wasn't right. This was torture. Whoever this man up above was, he had captured the woman and was starving her down here in the cave. More days passed. If it rained, a small trickle of water would flow down into the cave, and the woman would be almost licking the stone walls to quench her thirst. Every few days, the man returned with a bucket of refuse. Why was he keeping her alive? Paula couldn't give a straight answer to it. Only that after a time, the child up there with him stopped crying when they came here. What she absolutely didn't miss, though, was the madness in the woman's eyes. Her cheeks were sunken in, her hair had fallen out in bushels, and her arms looked almost like sticks. But this fire in her eyes never went out completely. She was still trying to climb, but now slower and more deliberate. There were cracks in the stones she used as grips until her fingers bled as she slowly and silently pushed herself up. It still wasn't enough, though. Every time she tried to climb up, she would eventually fall again. But the woman didn't care anymore. The dead body next to her had long since started to draw in flies and other insects. She didn't seem to notice. There were no longer tears streaming down her face when the man approached either. Only at night, when she slept, did she allow herself to cry. Paula could clearly feel it now. That same sensation that had overcome her when she had seen and heard the apparition the first time. This madness. A few days later, the man came by again. This time, though, it was only him. Paula could see it in the woman's eyes. She knew something had happened before her captor even reached the hole above. And after he did, her mind broke completely. Instead of a bucket of refuse, the man threw in a single object. A piece of jewelry, a wristband of some sort. It hit the floor, shimmering in the light, and while the man above chuckled, the woman lunged for the small object as if completely possessed. She was screaming, wailing and crying as she cradled it. The man above walked away. Paula already knew what had happened, and she could hardly look at the scene in front of her. The woman broke right then and there. She didn't stop crying or wailing until the next morning, kicking out with her feet, scratching at the ground. The woman reminded her of a rabid animal. There was nothing anyone could do for her anymore. She kept it up for days, till one morning, the noise of a door opening far away pulled her out of her trance. Paula watched as she shot up and ran for the dead body that had been lying next to her for weeks now. She scratched and tore at it as if she wanted to let out all her anger. Something was different about it. There were tears in her eyes while she did so. Paula saw her fingers disappearing in the sunken-in chest of the corpse, then heard a crack as one of the ribs broke and was pulled out. The stench alone was insane, but the woman didn't notice or care. Holding the broken rib, she ran toward the wall below the opening and jammed the bone into one of the cracks. Paula watched her putting her weight on it, then jumping off and racing back. One rib after another got broken and pulled from the corpse as the woman built herself a ladder. The sight was gruesome, yet she couldn't help but admire the woman. She was working on getting out of here, even in these circumstances. Paula watched her climb up the makeshift ladder with the 7th rib in her hand. Her fingers were bleeding, her face twisted into a manic grin. She rammed the rib into the cracks up top, then stopped for a moment as a new sound filled the air. People were shouting up there, and Paula could finally see the top of the hole. No! A scream had come out of her own mouth as she saw them. 6 men stood by the edge of the hole, holding a massive slab with a metal inlay between them. The woman screamed as the men let go of the slab and it fell. With a thud, all the light got snuffed out, leaving the cave in absolute darkness. Paula heard the woman cry, then fall and land with a sickening crunch. Her wails were echoing from the walls around her, and through the massive slab, Paula could hear them laughing. It was so cruel. Had it been planned? She couldn't say for sure, but in the darkness, she could hear the woman crawling past her. She was looking for a different way out. Paula felt tears in her own eyes. The wailing of that poor, captured woman didn't stop until she reached the cliff down below, slipped, and finally fell completely silent. She blinked and suddenly could see light again. Her phone. It was still in her hand, still illuminating the area. Water was rushing past her. Paula didn't care anymore. The apparition had gone, and she now knew what she had to do. Using her smartphone as a flashlight, she turned around and crawled up the slope. The ground was cold and slippery, but that was nothing compared to what the woman had gone through. She pushed herself on, ignoring the pain in her shoulder and the shaking of her whole body. Up the slope, beneath the opening, where water still streamed in, she could see it. Something shimmering off-white against the dark stone. The ribs. Paula groaned and climbed and hid her phone back in her jacket. She had to crawl beneath the falling water. It didn't matter, she told herself. She would get out of here. The first time she touched one of the bones, Paula felt this strange surge of panic filling her mind. It was like someone was screaming at her, howling and wailing as she pulled herself up. The cave, and especially the darkness behind her, got restless again. Paula grimaced through the pain as she lifted her other shoulder and started climbing. Weak light illuminated her as water drenched her while she pulled herself up, using the bones still sticking in the cracks as handles. The woman was wailing again, so pitifully. But now, Paula could hear the same anger she had seen in the visions taking over. Was she mad at her? For what? Climbing out when she hadn't managed it? Paula felt a chill as she heard the apparition again, its voice echoing back from the walls. She grabbed hold of the next bone while stepping on the one below. They were wobbling in the cracks as the voice of the spirit grew and grew. "I didn't do anything to you," Paula howled and pulled herself up with her hurt shoulder. The pain flooding her mind made her see stars. Just a bit more. She would get out in a few seconds. Paula looked down and sped up immediately. In the soft light, dimmed by the streaming water, she could see it. A human form, completely emaciated, was down there, staring up at her. And there was hate in her eyes, the same one she had seen before. Paula screamed in her thoughts as she put out her other hand, pulled herself up, and heard another wail. Ghostly fingers were grabbing hold of the first bone. This thing was coming after her. It wanted to pull her back down. She jumped and grabbed hold of the uppermost bone, just a bit beneath the slab. The ghost on her heels was coming up quicker. Paula had seen her in that vision. Her speed was incomparable to hers. The wails were getting louder again, almost drowning out the noise of the water. Paula put out her hand, grabbed hold of the edge of the opening in the slab, and jumped. Her body hung in the air for a second before she felt herself slipping again. No, she howled in her thoughts, reached out, and grabbed the metal parts of the inlet. They cut into her fingers, but Paula didn't care. All she could concentrate on was the freedom waiting above, the ghostly howls now coming from right beside her. Unseen fingers reached out to her and grabbed her shoe. She screamed and pulled herself up, kicking at the air while the ghost wailed angrily. Her shoe was torn from her foot as Paula heaved herself up through the opening. The wails turned into screeching. Fear and hate filled her mind. She smelled blood and despair. Paula cried out, pulled with all her might, and ignored the pain in her shoulder. One last time, she felt it. A ghostly hand around her ankle. With a curse, she kicked at the thing, but didn't feel any resistance. Pain shot through her, but Paula pushed herself on, pulled up her body with all her might, and suddenly, finally, felt the ghostly hand disappear. She rolled away from the slab as quickly as she could and heard the woman down there howling in agony. Paula jumped up to her feet and started running toward her house. The ghost hadn't come out yet, and she wasn't sure if she ever would. But there was no way in hell Paula herself would get close to the slab of concrete again. She ran and ran, and all the while, the ghostly wails now filled the air around her property.